Platforms like YouTube and TikTok have recently become the center for brainrot or even harmful content. Since the ElsaGate scandal in 2017, there have been many outbreaks of sick and deprived content targeted at children under the disguise of being child-friendly. They often use characters that were popular among children at the time and advertise themselves as educational videos or memes. The videos that fall under the ElsaGate name often depicted hypersexualized, disturbing themes. A lot of them portrayed disgusting fetishes, sexualized pregnancy, and promoted violence. Although this was temporarily limited through mainstream media coverage, the wave of traumatizing videos quickly resumed, with thousands upon thousands of highly addictive, destructive clips. So today, we will dive into and review the consequences of the dark side of children's content. What you just saw are just a few examples of content watched on a global scale by the youngest. Such content quickly finds its audience because it presents itself as seemingly child-friendly or educational, and often uses popular characters.
The wheels on the bus go round and round, round and round, round and round.
This animation fragment is, from a child's perspective, a colourful video with a catchy song. Seemingly nothing unusual. But if you look closely, you'll see an enormous amount of simulating colours and dynamic camera transitions. It not only presents overly intense colours, but also constantly changing dynamic scenes. If this fragment made you feel tired just by watching it, imagine what must be happening to a child who watches this dozens of times in a row. But before we delve into the disturbing world of children's content, we need to understand the roots of the problem. I mean, clearly the issue of overstimulating, disgusting videos hasn't just materialized out of nowhere. So let me introduce you to Generation Alpha. Generation Alpha, also known as the iPod generation, are children born after 2010. They do not know a world without ever-present phones and tablets. From their perspective, a screen has always been present in their lives. You've probably seen groups of children whose time spent together involves showing each other something on the phone, or those who can't walk to school or eat without turning something on in the background. That's Generation Alpha. Obviously, it's important to remember that when I'm talking about generations, I don't mean every single person in that group. I'm sure there are many children who don't behave as described. But the fact is that today's children have a completely different life compared to previous generations. For example, millennials grew up going to internet cafes to play games and to listen to music on MP3 players. They entered the era of the internet as teenagers or even adults. Generation Z entered the internet in their early teenage years, but still remember the times before smartphones. But not Generation Alpha. With the beginning of this generation, smartphones and iPads were already widely available, and parents increasingly started using them as tools to quiet their children. According to global data on TikTok users, nearly 33% are children aged 10 to 19, and the number of children using TikTok aged 5 to 7 increased by 30% in 2023. Now that we know what Generation Alpha is and why the problem of social media and technology is so prevalent among this group, we can try to find the causes of this phenomenon. First of all, upbringing. The upbringing of Generation Alpha differs from previous ones due to new social, technological and cultural trends. Devices like smartphones, tablets, consoles and computers are natural elements of the environment for children from the earliest years of life. It could even be said that, for some children, there is a close emotional relationship with their smartphone or tablet.
Can you have an iPad for me, please? Can you have an iPad? I want to be
Everyone has probably witnessed an explosive reaction from a child after taking away a toy or denying them something. Nowadays, such a reaction is often caused by limiting access to smartphones. We can't really understand this because we didn't have contact with smartphones or tablets from the age of 2 or 3. Imagine you're a small child and you've been waiting all week to watch your favourite cartoon on TV, but when the time finally comes, your parents don't let you watch it. That's a similar mechanism to what current children experience when their phones are taken away. As a study conducted by Ofcom in April this year shows, over 50% of children aged 5 to 7 have had some contact with technology. Therefore, it shouldn't be surprising that children can be addicted to smartphones or tablets from an early age. It's also worth mentioning that the impact of technology on the youngest is not limited to excessive attachment to smartphones or addiction to games. The study, How Young Children's Play is Shaped Through Common iPad Applications from 2021, indicated that children raised on iPads show a lower level of creativity, most likely due to the lack of opportunities for creative thinking or coming up with innovative solutions due to the predetermined instructions in games. This, in turn, can result in reduced creativity in younger generations. Think about it, if you didn't grow up in the era of the internet, you probably have memories of different games or activities on the playground that now may seem completely pointless. But as a child, they allowed you to spend time creatively. You probably wanted to explore the world and did silly things as a kid, and probably often got seriously injured in the process. Even I have a few stories to tell. A broken leg after jumping off the stairs, or several bee stings after getting too close to a nest were just some of the stupid things I did as a kid. So the conclusion is simple. Excessive use of phones or tablets by the youngest negatively affects their development because it doesn't allow them to explore the world and come up with creative activities. But let's now look at a few examples of content aimed at children. One of the most prominent cases of just completely brainrot and meaningless content is the Skibidi Toilet, which is a compilation of nearly 200 several-second long videos depicting a singing head sticking out of a toilet. This kind of videos generate record views. For example, the video we're seeing now has over 183 million views. Another widely recognized example of unreasonable or even dangerous content presented to children is the ElsaGate scandal. This case involves controversial content that was found on YouTube and YouTube Kids that was classified as child-friendly but actually containing topics dangerous to children. Searching for materials for this film, I found stuff that was just overwhelming. Starting from brain-eating shorts and thousands of content farms like Lankybox, and ending on just straight-out pornography. I'm not even kidding. After searching up innocent terms like Mr. Incredible Becoming Uncanny, FNAF, and clicking on playlists, we will be met with hundreds of playlists full of pornography. FNAF characters, real people, hentai. Yeah, you can find basically anything. What's mind-blowing to me is that these playlists deliberately choose search terms that are clearly aimed at children. Even the descriptions of such playlists include names of TV shows, games, and characters watched by children. Obviously, this is done to propagate such content to the youngest, but I just can't help but wonder why this is happening. Why would anyone spend their time and effort just to destroy some kids' childhood and innocence? The whole ElsaGate topic is way too deep to just mention it in the passing and deserves a separate film, which I hope to make someday, but I can recommend creators like Raymundo2112 who describe this nasty rabbit hole very well. Regardless, I decided to mention just a couple of the most notable examples I found. Just have a look yourselves.
Today we're doing an impossible Zoonomaly Guess My Drawing Picture Game Challenge in Roblox! Today, Lankybox is playing the brand new Garden of Banban Chapter 7!
Are you? Watch this.
Oh.
I have Skibbity Riz.
Oh no!
Like to use Skibbity Riz on Adam to ruin his day.
But moving away from the darker corners of YouTube now, it's worth mentioning the content that's actually aimed at children and which could be completely normal if not for its highly addictive form. For example, watching the already mentioned videos for children from channels like Cocomelon can give the impression that they are very intense, sometimes even aggressive. Bright colours, dynamic transitions and rapid camera jumps. All of this is, of course, aimed at profit because the more dynamic the cartoon, the greater the retention of the youngest attention. So a child watching such content is bombarded by short, highly intense materials. It's too much for you, but for a young, still developing brain, it can be distractive. And to be clear, I don't want to sound like a boomer complaining about the stupid youth that will ruin the world. I mean, I'm young myself and grew up when YouTube was already flooded with scary and inappropriate content. I remember being afraid to sleep at night because I clicked on a video about Jeff the Killer or hundreds of other inappropriate videos. What I mean is that when we were growing up, YouTube didn't promote such content among the youngest users. To find something inappropriate for 10-year-old me, I had to search for it myself. But nowadays, children are just pumped with inappropriate content by the YouTube algorithm, which actively promotes highly sexualized, dumb, and overstimulating videos. Of course, when comparing the cartoons I grew up with, such as The Amazing World of Gumball, Adventure Time or Phineas and Ferb, it's difficult not to notice their drastic changes compared to even older cartoons. But I think the thin line between an interesting cartoon and a brain-eating video has already been crossed. Andreas Iskander, who gathered over 9 million subscribers, most of whom children, is a channel dedicated to, well, it's hard to say what exactly. At first glance, it's a channel for children, which is suggested by the use of popular characters among younger audiences, like Huggy Wuggy or characters from the Digital Circus. But when you look closely, you can see an enormous amount of sexualized, brainless content made at the lowest possible cost. I mean, just look at this crap. I've been scrolling for about a minute and literally every video has almost identical thumbnails. One of the most popular videos, which has nearly 4 million views, is I caught TV women and speaker women on hot tub date in real life, which depicts characters of women in underwear with a TV and speaker instead of heads, which I think tries to resemble the characters from Skibidi Toilet. Yeah, it's pretty weird, I don't get it. It's also worth mentioning another weird trend of sexualizing literally every female character that appears on the internet. Something that's known as Rule 34. Obviously, I don't think I need to explain what motivates people to do this sort of stuff, and I don't really want to, but it's also a very deep topic that deserves a completely separate discussion. Just remember that anything that remotely resembles a woman on the internet, including characters loved by children, is used by a bunch of interesting people to create disgusting drawings and other forms of content. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that this shouldn't exist at all. Obviously, it's not gonna happen. Yeah, it's weird, but it was never meant for children. Adults should be able to do whatever they want as long as it doesn't harm others. But the problem with this sort of art is that it often depicted characters that are for children. So a child trying to search for their favorite TV or game characters is eventually going to find fetish art. So, now that we all know what really is on the internet, and what our children or younger siblings are often watching, it's worth looking at the consequences of such content. In 2010, the Human Connecting project had its beginning. Its goal was to build a complete map of the neural networks within our brain to understand how and why the brain functions, and to gather data about brain disorders such as depression, dyslexia or ADHD. This is of course an incredibly complex and respectable process, but what interests us are the 3 modes in which the brain can function. The first is the central executive network, which is active when we are consuming information. For example, while watching this video or performing a specific task. The next is the default mode network, which is active when our brain is in a passive state. This mode is responsible for those spontaneous, genius thoughts that come to you during a shower or before sleep, as well as your set of beliefs, worldviews and knowledge. The third and last is the salience network, which is responsible for detecting and remembering important information from the environment. This mode is responsible for remembering that running down the stairs is dangerous and that fire isn't something you want to be near to, but it also suggests which YouTube video to choose. Knowing this, it's easy to guess that when a child spends most of the day on the couch with a tablet, only the central executive and salience networks are active, while the default mode network is in rest mode. Since the default mode network is responsible for creating a model of the world, and it's inactive when consuming content, children who spend most of their time in front of the screen will feel anxiety, fear, and confusion when their access to phones is suddenly limited. This is because they haven't built a solid model of the world. This was proved in a study published by CNN Health in 2019, which involved children aged from 3 to 5 along with their parents. The children underwent MRI scans to estimate the amount of white matter in the brain. The study found that children who used phones, tablets or computers for more than the recommended 1 hour a day had a lower level of white matter development, which is crucial for developing skills such as speech, reading, writing and cognitive abilities. It's also hard not to mention the social consequences. Children who spend their time in front of a screen instead of playing with parents or peers will simply become socially withdrawn. A very good example of such a phenomenon was the quarantine a few years ago. I don't think I need to remind you of the feelings people had during that event. Many children suffered greatly from the restriction of peer contact, which resulted in situations where teenagers were afraid to go to the store after the quarantine ended. Social problems are additionally supported by the world created in social media, which very often does not reflect reality. I mean, we all know this perfectly. The internet constantly shows a version of the world built on the simplest and most impactful human desires, namely money and eroticism. It's a process in which a child will be entangled for years. It can start with a slightly undressed influencer appearing on TikTok one day. The first time, the child may be scared because parents forbade watching such content. The second and third, the child will pass by it indifferently, but by the 5th or 10th time, they will watch such a video in secret. And after a few weeks or months, the TikTok algorithm will flood the child with such content. Small children who get a phone for the first time are not aware of what they can find on the internet. And after repeated, not necessarily desired exposure to such content, they may just get used to it. So, how is the life of kids raised on screens made difficult? As teenagers or adults, we know that the internet is not what it seems. We realise that real life is not always colourful and dynamic, but the overstimulated brain of a child raised on dynamic TikTok videos is so used to constant information that it's slowly accepted as reality. All the music, bright colours and happy videos take more and more space in the minds of the youngest. But once they are taken away, life no longer seems fun to them. Playing with toys and friends, using imagination, being creative, it's simply less interesting than watching the funny guy with pink hair online. What do you think will happen to a young boy who came across adult media at the age of 8 or 9? Or to a girl who's told from the youngest years of life that they can make money by selling their body? Kids don't have a firm set of beliefs and morals like you and me. So if they see that everything and everyone online is based on sex, money and drugs, they may start viewing it as acceptable. There have been millions of kids who grew up with the ElsaGate content back in 2017. And sadly, many of them now have fetishes they wish they didn't have. The easy access to adult websites allows children who aren't even 10 to watch pornography, and kids are allegedly struggling at school as a consequence of the brain-rotting content that is fed to them. All of this may sound hopeless, and rightfully so. It's never been more difficult to control what your kid is doing in their free time. The constant access to social media, lack of fulfilling social interactions, and even the sense of duty kids may feel nowadays to have access to YouTube and TikTok just so they aren't different from other kids. All of this contributes to the view that Generation Alpha is doomed. But it's not too late. If you're a parent, older sibling, or even a friend of someone who watches any of the mentioned content, try to move them away from YouTube. The internet was never meant for kids, and we just can't expect corporations to take care of protecting the youngest from all the deprived, sickening shit out there. As long as it isn't a playlist of content specifically aimed at children, selected by you, don't let your kid use YouTube. Instead, show them media created for children, whether it's new cartoons or even something you grew up with. Instead of feeding your child those brainless Cocomelon videos, show them healthy and educational media. Children were never meant to consume videos all day. The beauty of childhood comes from the imagination we have as kids. So don't let your child waste away this imagination. Don't let them become subjects of mindless YouTubers, and just let kids be kids. I personally had parental control until late teenage years, so thankfully I avoided things like TikTok and Instagram. Obviously I hated it as a kid. I wanted to be like my friends who knew all those cool memes and scary videos. But reflecting back on my childhood, I'm glad I wasn't exposed to all of that terrible media. And yes, your kid will complain. I mean, obviously, that's what kids do. But in the future, once they become mature enough, they'll thank you just the way I and many other kids my age did. Moral of the story? don't let the internet raise your kid. I'm Matty. I hope that you'll join the fight and see you in the next one. Bye.